You are listening to the Abra Money 3.0 show, your guide to the future of all things money. In this episode, Abra founder and CEO Bill Barhydt is in conversation with David Vorick, co-founder and CEO of Sia. The network that Sia is building is a really interesting example of the kinds of technologies that are made possible by blockchain and cryptocurrencies. Sia is a decentralized cloud storage network that ultimately allows its users to have more control over their data. Before jumping in, remember, the information presented in this podcast is provided for informational purposes only. It should not be used or construed as an offer to sell or solicitation of an offer to buy any of the financial assets discussed. Any opinions expressed herein are subject to change. Neither Abra nor any of the participants in this podcast make any representation as to the suitability or appropriateness of these financial assets for individual investors. And with that out of the way, on to the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Abra's Money 3.0. Bill Barhydt here, CEO and founder at Abra. With me today, joining me for the Money 3.0 podcast is David Vorick. David is CEO of, did I get it right? Is it Nebulous, or how do I say it?
That's Nebulous.
Nebulous, right. And Nebulous is best known as the creator of Sia Coin. And I really want to dig into this because I'm really interested in decentralized storage. And so let me ask you a question right out of the gate. Why should consumers, first of all, welcome? And second, why should consumers care about decentralized storage in the cloud?
Yeah, great question. And I think it really comes down to control, not just of your data, but like of the world around you. So when we put data on, say, like Google or on Gmail or on iCloud, what's happening is these other companies are taking our data, they're scanning our data, they're learning who we are, they're crafting advertisements, they're trying to, like, it's Google's goal to shape our behavior, shape the way we spend money, to fit, their purpose and to fit their bottom line. And so if we don't have control of our data, we're kind of just offering our lives up to Google, and Google's going to make the most of it.
Yep. So I was watching this Great Hack documentary, and it's okay. I mean, I think for those of us in the middle of all this stuff, it's probably not as deep as it should be, but it's definitely worth watching. I encourage all of the Abra viewers who are on Netflix to watch the Great Hack. Brittany Kaiser is kind of the protagonist who was the whistleblower on the whole Cambridge Analytica thing, and she's created this movement around own your own data, right? And kind of an anti-Facebook pitch. And how can we relate that to social media? Is there a way to basically leverage this new technology to still have the social graph, but be able to own your own data at the same time?
Yeah, I think there is, and really what we care about with the social graph is sharing things with our friends, and of course, so we're online, our friends are online, and if we have a platform like Sia where we can put data and where we can share data with each other, um, I think you can see that Facebook isn't strictly a necessary part of being social. So I do think that with these decentralized technologies coming out, there are ways that we can replace, not just Facebook, but like Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, Instagram, with decentralized versions of these applications that don't allow a company like Facebook to, gain access to our lives and to, control what we see.
Yeah, and how does the user experience most likely manifest itself, right? I mean, the idea of owning your own key to your own data for a computer scientist like yourself or myself is very compelling, right? It's complete ownership and agency over your life. Again, very compelling. But the user experience around that, in terms of what happens if I lose my keys, how do I actually access the information when I'm on the move? It's very daunting, right? So how do you think that plays itself out over time?
Yeah, so I kind of see, I think we've demonstrated as a society that we're very good about keeping certain important items on us at all times. For example, our cell phones and our credit cards, I think,
Hmm.
are two items that really don't have trouble, following us as we travel throughout the day and throughout the world. And so I think that we're gonna either adapt the cell phone to like include something related to our keys or pick up another card like another credit card. that has our keys on it and our identity on it. And then we'll also, like what happens if you lose it? If you lose a credit card, you have a process to go get a new credit card, generally involving a bank. And I actually think it's pretty reasonable that some combination of a bank, a safe deposit box, or maybe like a family lawyer, they would have everything that you need to reconstruct a new identity if you lose your card. And you could just, same thing with the credit card, you invalidate the old one, you announce the new one, and then so I do think that it's early and we don't have these tools yet. But I see us getting to a point where a decentralized identity is comfortable and familiar and has a similar UX to items that are already super important to us and that we always have on us.
So it's almost like what you're saying is that the third party that you trust may be the one backing up your credentials as opposed to the data itself, because ultimately if you lose the phone, you got to go back to your wireless carrier to get your IMEI on a new SIM card. And if you lose your credit card, you got to basically call up your bank or the card issuer to get a new card. And that just may be the access point into this decentralized world. So it's an interesting twist on how a lot of people have been thinking about this, because ultimately, even though we tout this issue of owning your own keys at Abra, the reality is most of our users, even the people listening to this, really just aren't there yet in terms of owning their own keys. Some are. We have many users who believe in it. Let's take a step back and talk about Sia Coin now. And thank you for humoring me on these intro questions. Give me the background. Where does Sia Coin come from? How did this get started? Let's go through it step by step.
Yeah, so I would say Sidecoin really comes from a background of disliking the cloud. I've been off of Facebook for several years, and I've never really been comfortable with the idea of like giving all of my information to Facebook, giving all my information to Google, because I know that these are companies with ulterior motives. At the end of the day, their goal is to make money, and their goal is to protect me only so far as protecting me makes me money. And so, really, my data is super important to me, and I wanted to create an infrastructure or a platform where I can store my data without having to worry about the ulterior motives of the people that I'm giving the data. I wanted the platform to be like inherently aligned with my goals, and so that's really what we're trying to do with Sia.
How does that differ from BitTorrent or other uh, decentralized or quasi, even I don't know if they're decentralized is the right term, but let's call them sufficiently decentralized cloud storage systems?
Yeah. So the thing that Sia does that I think no one else does really well is it gives people an incentive to hold on to data that they don't care about. So in the example of BitTorrent, a file is only going to be available on BitTorrent if a bunch of other people care about it. And so that's really great for things like, say, movies or music, because a lot of people listen to the same music and watch the same movies. But if you want to put your like family videos on BitTorrent, and especially if you want to put your encrypted family videos on BitTorrent, no one's going to seed that, because who cares about that data? It's only interesting to you, and especially if it's encrypted, it's definitely
Yep.
only
Yep.
interesting to you. But on the Sia network, you actually pay other people to hold on to it. So even though it's encrypted and they have no idea what data you just gave them and they don't care about it at all, you also like put them under this contract that pays them for holding on to it, and so they're happy to hold on to it for you because they're getting paid. And I think that's really where we diverge from other platforms.
Do I know as a consumer how many nodes are actually storing a copy of each piece of the data that's out there?
Yes, you do. So when you upload data to the Sia network, your node picks how many places to put the data in. And right now, if you're just using the default like standard client, it's going to put your data on 30 different hosts, each of the 30 being paid separately to hold the data. And we use something called Reed Solomon. So this is a redundancy scheme where out of those 30 hosts, you only need 10 of them. And it doesn't matter which 10 to get your data back.
Gotcha. And if I'm a host, and I assume by the way, there's something like a hash being run on the data. versus the original upload to show the owner that the integrity of the data is such that the data that they're hosting is correct or valid, that they're not paying for something that isn't
Yep.
there. So if I'm a host now and it costs me X dollars to pay for storage or buy my storage, what's my ROI today on taking Siacoin as a payment mechanism for hosting somebody else's data in this decentralized model?
Yeah, so we're seeing on the Sia network today, the top hosts are making between $5 and $10 per month to hold on to people's data, and we estimate that these hosts have about maybe $300 worth of infrastructure that they're committed to holding the Sia data. So in terms of like raw dollars, the Sia network is still fairly small, but I think just this year, we've kind of crossed the threshold where hosts are actually able to turn a profit at this point, making $5 per month or $10 per month on a $300 investment is fairly good for hardware that's expected to last 5 to 7 years.
Yep. So basically, about a 2.5 year um, return, and then you can basically, do an MPV on that. It sounds like okay. And do you know
Yep.
how many nodes there are out there today, and how many individuals are storing information on those nodes?
Yeah. So it looks like well, actually, we're pretty confident there are about 300 nodes on the network today that are storing data. And then we estimate, this is harder to be certain, that there are about 1,000 individuals on the network that are using the storage.
Gotcha, gotcha. It's really interesting. I'm going to have to start playing with this. I have so much personal data that I trust, and I won't say who because I don't want the hackers to basically go nuts. That I trust to various service providers, and it's such a weak link in my life um, that it's one of these things where I'm sure you guys talk about this all the time. That until somebody's hacked, they probably don't care, or they don't care enough about this issue, right? And then that begs the question: well, if I'm encrypting my information, which I'm guessing your software does, I'd like to get your take on that. But if I'm encrypting my information and uploading it to these nodes, you're obviously saying that that's definitely more secure than trusting a Google Drive or iCloud or Dropbox or whatever. And why is that more secure than basically just encrypting the data and putting it on that central place and then having my own password that's impossible to guess?
Yeah. So we do encrypt the data before we put it up. The Sign network is a security first mentality, and so if we don't know how to do something securely, we just won't enable it as a feature. So everything that we know how to do securely. But then, um, actually, sorry, I lost the second half of the question.
So how do I know that this is more secure than using a centralized cloud storage where I'm just uploading encrypted data there? So even if somebody was to hack the cloud service, they couldn't decrypt the data.
Okay. Yeah. So if you are encrypting the data locally and then uploading it after you've encrypted it, then your data privacy is actually probably equivalent. The cloud isn't going to be able to get into your data as long as you're
Yeah.
using a strong encryption algorithm. The cloud isn't going to be able to get into your data any more than a SIA host is going to be able to get into your data. But in terms of security, um, the cloud provider can at any time change their terms of service, can eject you for violating terms of service, can change the prices, and so you're kind of at the whims of what your provider is deciding for whether or not you're going to be able to get your data back. Whereas with the Sia network, since it's fully decentralized, there is no like company that can make their decision, snap their fingers and make a decision to kick you off the network or accuse you of violating terms of service. It's not a even though we're the builders of the platform, we don't have the power to force people off the platform or change how much they pay to store data on the Sia network. And I think that comes with some peace of mind.
Yeah. So how does Nebulous or Sia make money then? if there is no quote unquote owner of the network?
Great question. So there's a fee model built right into the blockchain that we use. So every time that you upload data to the Sia network, a fee gets transitioned to essentially our company. And that's a rule of the consensus network. If you wanted to stop paying us or circumvent the fee, you'd have to go clone the Sia network, pull out the fee, and then launch a completely separate platform. And the kind of idea behind this fee is that we're building the network, we're adding value to it. If we disappear, you stop getting new features and such. And so what we found is that all of our users are perfectly happy to pay the fee because they know that the value they're getting out of us being alive is greater than the money that they pay to the fee.
Yeah. How does it work from a blockchain perspective? If I'm accessing data and I need real time access to my information, what are you transacting on the blockchain, and how does the performance of that relate to my ability to access my data? Because blockchains are notoriously inefficient and slow, right?
Yes, that's a great question. So we do everything over layer two. So essentially, when you join the Sia network, you have to create a set of file contracts. And so right at the beginning, as you're getting started, there is this process of downloading the blockchain, verifying it, creating transactions that go on chain. And so there's a setup process. But once you're set up, everything these file contracts are actually state channels and payment channels. And so if you want to pay a host to download your data, that happens off chain and that can happen instantly. And you send the host a payment packet, the host will send you back your data, and it happens very quickly. And you never, once you're set up, you're never waiting for the blockchain to upload or download data or to send data to your friends.
Are the Sia nodes? I don't know if I'm using the right terminology. Are the Sia nodes the same nodes that route the payments?
So yeah, we call the hosts on the network, the people storing data, we call them hosts, and the hosts are the ones who facilitate the payment channel. So they're the other side, and if you're doing any sort of routing, it'll be going through the hosts.
Now, this sounds a lot like Lightning, of course, and I'm guessing that this precedes Lightning. Is there a lot of similarity there, or are there key differences?
At a very high level, they're similar in terms of what they enable you to do. We use actually something called packetized payments. So in the Lightning Network, you kind of do everything all at once. And in the Sia network, you do everything in little tiny bits. And so what that means for us is that it's a lot easier for us to do a bunch of transactions at once. For example, when you download data, you're not actually paying one host; you have to pay 10, and we can actually get better speeds if you're paying all 30 hosts. So we might make 30 transactions in 100 milliseconds. And because we use packetized payments, the technology is just it's a lot faster, and the amount of money that we can send over the network is a lot smaller. But the amount of money we need to send over the network is a lot smaller than the Lightning Network. So I would say from a user level, they're pretty similar. At the technical detail, they're fairly different.
I see. So it's an advantage in your case, the fact that you're paying all the nodes, because the ability to fan out the money is easier to implement than just going to one specific person via a Lightning node. I totally get it. So interesting. But that is a really interesting technology that you've created in order to solve a key problem within Sia. That's very interesting. So what's next? I guess before you answer what's next, I think let me narrow that a little bit. I think it's really cool. I think I see the advantages. Realistically, how do we go from a few early adopters who just don't like Facebook, don't like cloud storage companies, to more mass adoption of decentralized online storage?
Yeah, I think there are two elements there. The first is that the technology is still a little rough around the edges. It's not something I think my grandmother would have an easy time using or getting comfortable with, and that's just something the more we build and the more we iterate, it gets progressively better and better. But then the other half is like the crypto world as a whole is kind of still early and coming to term, and so um, we still haven't figured out the best UX. We still, it's still not the case that everybody has cryptocurrency. The percentage of cryptocurrency owners in the world is very small. And I think that, all of this is going to have to kind of come forward together.
So, okay. And are we talking like 2 years, 5 years? What do you think is realistic here in terms of taking this mainstream?
Yeah, so I think if we're defining mainstream as like, 50% of all Americans, I do think we're probably looking at the 5 to 10 year range as opposed to the 2 or 3 year range. I do think the technology still needs some work.
Yep, yep. Now, as much as I hate regulation, right? I'm wondering if you guys have seen any sign that any of either the existing, pending, or maybe future regulation, as it would relate to overseeing a Facebook or Google or Apple or whoever, could potentially give you a head start in or a kickstart in terms of being able to promote this type of decentralized system versus centralized systems. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, so it's certainly interesting to see things like the antitrust stuff that's coming down on Facebook, and I think that really favors us because it is a technology where trusts are about control and worrying that one company has too much power and is abusing it, and we're building a platform where nobody has power and where power cannot be abused. And so I think as people get more, think more and more about the tech monopolies that exist, legislation that comes down on them is likely to favor us. On the other hand, you have a lot of like know your customer and anti money laundering regulation that it's not intended to harm Sia, but an unfortunate side effect is that it makes it much harder for the Sia network to transact cleanly and comfortably. And so it's something we're paying a lot of attention to. We are donors to several groups that try and help shape the law, and try and fight for digital rights and digital freedom. And so right now, I would say there's no legislation that's super worrying at the moment, but we're definitely paying attention and kind of it's something we worry about.
Yep, yep. Really interesting. So now let's talk about you for a minute. So you're from Chicago, is that right?
That's correct. Chicago suburbs.
Yeah. Cool. So I think you and I both kind of have a similar background in terms of going to, I went what I would call to one of these working class engineering colleges. I did my undergrad at Stevens before dropping out of Stanford, and I know you went to RPI, which was always like a competing one of that like small group of competing Northeast engineering schools. And how did that kind of shape your vision of the world, and how did you go from just wanting to be I assume a software programmer to somebody who is really all in this new decentralized world?
Yeah, I think actually I would say the student body at RPI had a huge hand in shaping my worldviews. And so the other students who were there, I think, were really good at challenging me, and especially when it came to like learning how to be a good programmer and a good engineer. They were much better at like um, just teaching and presenting challenges, and like we would tackle tasks together. And so I think that was much more important than a lot of what the RPI administration did. I also have to mention though, yeah, we had an open source club, and then RPI also had something called the Severino Center, which is like an entrepreneurship center. There were several mentors at the Severino Center who kind of opened my eyes to the world of doing startups and running companies, and I think ultimately it was a combination of our open source club and our entrepreneurial center at RPI that yeah showed me that I didn't have to go to Google, and that a comfortable engineer salary at Google is not the only way to live once you leave college. And so yeah.
Gotcha. Now, did you start Sia Coin before leaving RPI? Is that how far back it goes, or did they come later?
Yeah, so we incorporated the company, I think like 1 or 2 weeks before graduating. So I spent 3 years at RPI. I graduated my third year, and I one semester before I graduated, I actually was asking Google to let me drop out and start full time a semester early with no degree, which Google denied. And then it was really my final semester that I started to come around a lot more to the idea of starting my own company. And so I almost feel like it just happened spontaneously. But now that I have and I've been through the whole entrepreneurship experience, I know that it's like a much better fit for my personality to go out and blaze your own trail and struggle with something that you have a high ownership of. I've been really happy that I did that.
How many pivots have you guys had? I mean, is it really the same kind of product platform, or have you had to refactor the company? Is it are we looking at our incarnation number 6 of Siacoin, or is this really still number 1?
So amazingly, this is incarnation number two. It's something we're actually internally very proud of. Um, when we got started in May 2014, we had certain ideas of how things were going to work. We approached a lot of the Bitcoin developers and Bitcoin core developers for peer review, and they gave us some very sharp feedback. And we realized that we ultimately had to throw everything away, and that what we had made initially was not great. So I would say that was incarnation one. We threw everything away in 2014. So we were getting rid of maybe 6 months of full time work between me and my co founder. So it was uncomfortable. But then we sat down. We didn't program for like a month. We just ironed out what we wanted the Sia network to look like. And the product, the final result, we released in November 2014, a new white paper that completely redefined what the Sia network was and how it worked. And amazingly, the white paper is still like reasonably accurate today. That's essentially what is explained in the white paper is essentially how everything works today. Some of the small details are wrong, but the big ideas are exactly what we're doing 5 years later.
I'm curious. I'm curious how you think about kind of enterprise storage, right? So there's a lot of companies today that are going to Amazon and Google and Microsoft for cloud services in the enterprise, and these have become wildly profitable businesses for all three companies, right? The cost of running those cloud businesses gives them fantastic economies of scale. Years ago, people thought, "Hey, nobody's going to trust Amazon with their corporate data," and now everyone is, right? Do you foresee a point where enterprises start using this type of decentralized system where they actually don't even know who's potentially storing the data, which country it might be in, you know, et cetera, et cetera? Do you foresee that happening?
Yeah, so I will say that actually the Sia network does give you plenty of ability to control who's storing your data and what country it goes in, et cetera. And so in the default settings, you don't really know. But if you want to, there are tools in the Sia ecosystem that give you these insights and also give you the ability to say, only store my data in Europe. And if you want to do that, that's something you can. But more to the point of the enterprise question, I think that something the economy and like corporations and enterprise struggle with as a whole right now is analyzing systemic risk, and it comes up as things blow up and people think about it more as stuff blows up. So I think a failure to analyze systemic risk was a big part of the 2008 recession. And as companies are seeing more and more things like data breaches, or for example, AWS went down, EC2 went down, and then like half the internet was offline. You couldn't load images on Imgur. Some people couldn't turn
Right.
on their
Shoes. I
lights
hadn't
because
heard
their
that one
smart
before.
lights
Shoes
had
couldn't
to
tie
connect to
themselves.
AWS before
Yeah.
they powered on. Shoes couldn't tie themselves anymore. It's like this crazy thing happened. Um, and it's one of my favorites. You can Google that. I believe it was Nike had a pair of shoes that stopped being able to tie. Um, and as things like this happen, we start to realize more and more that there's these big systemic risks attached, associated with putting all our eggs in one pot. And I think if we evolve as a company to treat systemic risk more seriously, and we account for risk seriously, decentralization will come forward as this like shining release valve, as a way to mitigate or eliminate risk by moving, not just to Sia, but to Bitcoin or to stable coins or to other decentralized systems that who entire like reason for being is to eliminate risk. And so I would present Sia as it's a platform that its whole goal is to clear these risks away.
Yep. So I get that. That makes sense. Um, what about just the path to companies really accepting that they should trust some unknown third party to actually store the data? I mean, if everything you're saying is true, why not just say, hey, we're going to have a backup ourselves that we're going to put up off-site, and we're just going to own it, and it's going to be totally compliant with whatever local laws we have to deal with?
Yeah, so I think it starts as an education challenge, and it's not just some unknown computer. It's some unknown computer that's storing encrypted data that put up collateral that has something to lose if they fail to store your data. That also is being paid. It has something to gain, and so we have all these incentives and alignments in place that we have to teach people about and get them comfortable with, and we have all these fail safes, and that we have to get companies comfortable with. But it's kind of the same thing the cloud went through. You start with this like big period of education, and as you get through that, it turns from being about education to kind of becoming instilled as common sense. And so people will stop needing to know all the details. They won't need to know about the incentives or understand like exactly why it's safer. They'll just know, based on experience, based on expert review, based on having seen that the system has been working for 10 years with no issues. um, It'll become common sense that Sia or decentralization is the safer way to do things. And then in the specific case of Sia, which is not true for all blockchain applications, it also helps that we're faster, have better uptime, and about an order of magnitude less expensive than centralized alternatives.
Okay, so let's segue that into where you really see all this going. So let's say that we're um, you know 5 years out. What do you foresee kind of happening here? I mean, do you foresee a renaissance of decentralization in all aspects of people's lives online, or do you still see kind of centralized monoliths uh, that are running the world and you know owning everything, or do you see an undoing of the status quo?
Yeah, I think so. I think 5 years out, what we'll see is the first like big decentralized applications starting to gain substantial traction, and maybe not enough to be called mainstream, but enough that everybody on Wall Street is thinking about it, and is seeing the shift that's coming. And so I think we're still going to see these big centralized monoliths have control in 5 years, but um, the world will have clued in at that point that like the tides are turning, and that it's going to go away. And I think if we look 10 years down the line, I see people probably aren't aware that um, that they're now on decentralized platforms, but kind of the same thing that Linux took over the server world. Almost every website in the world runs on an open source platform. It will also be the case that every every payment in the world is going to happen over a decentralized payment network. It's going to be powerful enough that all the infrastructure builders are going to strongly prefer the decentralized solution. It's just going to be how the world works at one point.
So what's the short term killer app that you think the world needs that would take advantage of these decentralized systems that you're most excited about?
I mean, honestly, I'm most excited about Sia and some of the storage stuff we have coming out. I think by the end of 2020, it's going to be possible to build, say, a decentralized YouTube or a decentralized Medium or even a decentralized Zencaster um, on the Sia network. And I think, uh, yeah, that's what I'm personally most excited about is making that available for people.
Do I think that's awesome. Do the content providers, the studios, the music publishers, do they ever come to you guys to actually talk about creating their own services or understand where the world is going, um, or are you guys still a little too far ahead of the curve at this point?
Yeah, so we've had a few conversations, and I think that whenever we're talking to a larger company, like say a Dropbox or like a music studio, it comes down to scale and technology maturity, and they want to see more total storage on the network. They want to see more total users. But the fun thing about that is that we've been growing. For the past 9 months now, we've been experiencing about 20% growth per month. So you draw that out over another year of time frame, and I think we will have um, hit the scales and the maturity that these platforms are looking for. So definitely they're aware of it, but they're not certain that they can believe in it yet. Is what I would
Yep.
say.
It seems like and I'm kind of thinking out loud here, but it seems like the logical path to get there is almost academic, right? So going to CERN and MIT and all of the other big research institutions that create IBM even that create the most content and say, let's create instead of the web itself, right, where you're basically just hosting on Amazon like everyone else, or running servers in your lab with CS students. Let's basically develop this shared global resource that truly is decentralized and show the world that we can do that using something like Sia so that later on there's a showcase for the next version of Netflix or YouTube or whatever decentralized consumer service wants to do something like this, but maybe not be the first. Um, is that a realistic path forward?
Yeah, I think so, and I can say from experience that we have seen, for example, we have talked to CERN, and we've talked to other academic institutions, and they have this nice problem of data that they need to share. Also, they don't have a ton of money, so they need a cheap way to store it, and then they also need some platform that allows the data to stick around once they disappear if the data is useful to other people. And Sia is like at an interesting nexus of all three, as well as just being better or healthier, a healthier way for society to exist. So I do think that that is like a viable avenue for getting things off the ground.
Yep. So what would you need from the public or from, let's call this a call to arms, right? I mean, what do you need in terms of help or support to get something like that going?
Yeah, so I think that the it really needs more attention, and this is not just Sia, but the crypto space as a whole really needs more attention from developers who are willing to try things out, willing to provide feedback, willing to do something in a way that nobody in crypto has done before. Take some ideas from their background and their industry, and apply it to crypto. I think a lot of people, don't realize how young of an industry crypto is, and how many ideas that might be obvious, in the financial sector, obvious in the bio sector, we just never have come across those ideas. And so, I think we're still really looking for builders at this point to enter the space and to bring their ideas and to just try things out. I think that would help a lot.
So if I'm one of those builders and I want to use a decentralized storage medium to create the killer academic network, where would I go to find out more information, get started, start seeing what I can build with what's out there today with tools like Sia?
Yeah. So on the Sia network specifically, I think there are two big resources available. The first is our website, which is sia.tech. And that's where you're going to find a good intro to the platform. And if you go to sia.tech/docs, you'll see the API for Sia. So you'll understand how to interact with it, and what you need to do to build an application that's based on Sia. And then the other place that I think has been super valuable for newcomers to the Sia network is our Discord. So discord.gg/Sia is a chat room community essentially of people who work with the technology every day, who build applications on top of the technology, who use it and run it, and who know the ecosystem and can really help you um, get started with the Sia network and answer questions and such.
Fantastic. So, look, I love what you're doing. I think it's fantastic for the ecosystem. We're thrilled that Sia is part of the Abra network. Our users can deposit and withdraw and exchange between all of our currencies and Sia coin. So thank you for your contributions to the community, and we will continue to do our part to make people aware of Sia and the project, and hopefully. This will lead to more and bigger and better opportunities for everyone in the ecosystem. So thank you so much for your contributions.
Thank you, and we're super excited to be involved. Super excited that you've incorporated us into your ecosystem, and yeah, we want to see the world move forward.
Thank you so much. So, David Vorick, CEO and co-founder of Nebulous and Siacoin, thank you so much for joining Abra's Money 3.0 podcast, and we'll call it there. That's a wrap for another episode of Money 3.0. Thanks everyone for joining, and we will see you very soon. Have a great day.
Thanks again for listening to the Abra Money 3.0 show. We hope you liked this episode as much as we did. If so, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and download the Abra app wherever you get your apps. Thanks again.